Okay, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and thanks to our host, Yossi. And it's good to be back. We were away for a bit. Got back this morning from the Netherlands, not just Amsterdam, but a tour of the Netherlands. This week's Parsha Re'eh begins, Re'eh Anochi Noten Lifnechem Hayom Bracha Uklala. See that I am presenting before you today a blessing and a curse. Okay, let me close off my computer. Sorry. I'm giving a Zoom, so I have to call you back. Okay, sorry about that. So we'll talk more in a moment about the bracha and klala, but coming back as it is from Amsterdam, you see really two sides of the story, like anywhere else we go. Uh, the Netherlands was a place of great Jewish life in its day. A lot of very celebrated rabbinic figures came out of there, and it was really a beautiful community. However, as we know, once the Shoah came, once the Nazis moved in, which was relatively late into the Netherlands, of course, that community was essentially destroyed. As a matter of fact, the highest percentage of Jews killed during the Holocaust in Western Europe were from the Netherlands. By the way, the Netherlands is the greater name. Holland, we sometimes call it, but that's only two of the 15 provinces in the Netherlands. So there was some affinity with the Nazis, as the Nazis regarded the Dutch as a kind of Aryan cousin. And unfortunately, almost the entire community was wiped out. Today, there are but 43,000 Jews left in the Netherlands, and that doesn't even really tell the story, because of those 43,000 Jews, more than 50% do not identify with Judaism. And in that group of 43,000, a full 25% are Israelis who have come to the Netherlands. It is a beautiful country. Just as for those who haven't been there, you would imagine it with the canals and the beautiful seafront, as well as the rolling hills, etc. But it does hide a very tragic history of the Jewish people. The Amsterdam has one of the most beautiful Bate Knesset in the world. Some would say the Spanish Portuguese synagogue, but it is primarily used for purposes other than a shul. Events, musical events. It's only open on Shabbat, and the attendance is rather sparse. Very sad. It was spared by the Nazis, so it remains in its original form. Very, very beautiful. It's well known for the fact that candles are lit instead of electric lighting. So it retains a certain historical presence, quite beautiful, but unfortunately, not offering much spirituality today. Let me go back. I want to uh, touch upon a couple of different issues from this beautiful parsha of Re'eh. As I said, the parsha begins Re'eh Anochi Noten Lifnechem Hayom Bracha Uklala. Hashem says He's putting before us a blessing and a curse. Uh, Now, the first question there that some people want to ask is, why do we have to choose between those two extremes, a blessing and a curse? Most of us are somewhere in the middle. We're far from perfect. I wouldn't say that we're being cursed, but we certainly do things wrong, and yet we have many blessings. I once asked my rabbi about this question, and he said the answer is quite simple, that if you shoot for blessing, you may or may not achieve the blessing. But you will do great things. If you try to set your sights on a middle ground, mediocrity, then you won't even achieve that. That may end up being the curse in your life, that you did not try to do everything you possibly could to live up to your potential. If you do, then whatever you do will be a blessing. If you don't fully meet that blessing. So, thus, one explanation of this, and it's true for all of us, we do the best we can and should not settle for mediocrity, because we'll end up with less than that. The pasuk goes on and says something very mysterious. Et habracha, about the blessing, asher tishmu al mitzvot Hashem Elokechem, if you will listen to God, asher nochim mitzavechem hayom, all the things, says Moshe, that you are being commanded today, and it stops there. It doesn't say if you will listen or when you will listen, then what? What's the blessing? And then similarly, it says the converse, Im lo tishma'u el mitzvot Hashem Elokechem, if you won't listen to those brachot, then v'sartem min haderech, you will divert from the path, asher anochim mitzavechem hayom, which I am commanding you today. You will go after other gods, etc. So, if you look at these two ideas, you're left with a question. It seems to say, it wants to tell us what is the blessing, what is the curse, and it starts to tell us if you will listen, if you won't listen, but it never tells you what exactly will be your fate. The klala a little bit that you will worship other gods, but the bracha doesn't really say you'll have long life, you'll be rewarded with prosperity, with good children. It doesn't say that. I think in this last message that Moshe is bringing, and often throughout the book of Devarim, he hints at things. He doesn't say things always directly. And I think what he's hinting at and saying here is, if you want blessing in life, if you will listen, ultimately those blessings will come to you. Listening in the sense of paying attention to what God is telling us. You don't have such a full expectation, Hashem doesn't, that, well, you're going to scrupulously perform all the mitzvot. But what's important is at least to pay attention to it. My father, Olav Shalom, used to always tell a riddle regarding this opening parsha, on the idea of, well, where is the blessing being mentioned? And he would ask us, and we used to have riddles usually around the Shabbat table, and he would say, how long is a Chinaman? And we would look at him and say, how long is a Chinaman? How do we know? Did we measure him? Why such a silly question? But of course, in the end, he was saying this isn't a question at all. It's a statement. How long is a Chinaman? That's the name of this Chinese person. And here he says Hashem is, in a sense, telling us the same thing, not leaving us waiting for the answer, but telling us the blessing is in the listening. The ability to listen is a great blessing. We here in Israel, we sometimes have an issue with this. It's hard for us to listen to what the other person is saying. Have you noticed that? We cut each other off in the middle of a sentence. And instead of just being patient, let's hear what the other person has to say, and then it will be our turn. Generally speaking, we can't wait to do that. The blessing is encapsulated within the very ability to listen. Some of the smartest people we know are those who are good listeners, who are able to connect to what somebody else is saying by putting on hold your own opinion, and let's see what this other person has to say. It's very difficult. It's I find in our society And you see this, of course, in its most, I would say, vulgar fashion on Israeli TV news stations when they're interviewing somebody and they can never, ever get out a full sentence. They have to continually interrupt one another because it's so hard for them to just be quiet and listen. Let's hear what you have to say, then it will be our turn. And I think Moshe is telling people, just listen. If you listen hard enough, you'll hear, even you'll hear what Hashem has to say. But you have to be ready to listen. I remember in the days when Rabbi Akiva Tatz was giving lectures in Renan. I was bringing him every week. He would often say, "Are you ready to hear this?" Before he presented an idea. He said, if you're not ready to hear this, then it's wasted words. You'll never get it. You have to mentally, emotionally be prepared that I'm going to, in a sense, tune myself out for a bit, and then I'm going to hear what's going to be said. Um, so there is an idea here of going out of our way, in a sense, for the other person. And so I want to connect this to this very beautiful phrase that is here in our week's Parsha, but also was back in Parshat V'et, which we did not have a session, so we didn't talk about it then. It talks about doing Hatov v'hayashar be'inei Hashem. You shall do that which is good, and yakar can mean correct or justified, justifiable in the eyes of God. And this is a fascinating commandment, if you will, or statement, because it's very ambiguous. What do you mean, you shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of God? Tell me, God, what is it, and I'll do it. But here you're getting what I call the elastic clause of Judaism. There are several elastic clauses. Another one is Hashem Elokecha Tira, you shall fear your God. It's hard to define what that means, but it basically is all encompassing with a respect and regard and a fear and allegiance and awe of God. Here, when we say, do that which is good and right in the eyes of God, well, that kind of leaves us hanging because maybe different people will do what is good and what is right in their eyes. So the commentators are also somewhat mystified by this phrase. Um, the Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, the Natziv, he says Yashar means have a sense of justice, be an honest person, be an ethical person, even though it may not be a specific commandment, although some of these are, because we are told, stay far away from dishonesty. But it's more a little bit kind of up in the air. He also says on the word tov, do that which is good, to mean act for the good of others, not only yourself. Refrain from doing something, even if it may be allowed, if it negatively affects other people. So the Torah doesn't have to specifically command you on each and everything you do. Use your head, use your brain, use your heart, and think, is what I'm doing a good thing or not? And Hashem and Moshe is telling the people, I won't always be there to hold your hand and tell you every single thing, whether it's right or wrong. Yes, you're getting the mitzvot, you're getting the commandments, and that does obviously give you guidelines and tells you do's and don'ts. But there are a lot of other things that are not specifically mentioned. You have to read between the lines and be the kind of person that somehow gets it. And I think by listening, of course, that's one way of getting it. So it occurs to you what is right and what is wrong in situations that are not so clearly defined. I give you many, many examples. We live in a country where people are making loud noise all the time. Now, there's no crime against it. There are actually ordinances about honking your horn in Israel and maybe other places too much. But talking loudly is not necessarily a bad thing or out loud, but you have to know when it's appropriate to talk loudly and when it isn't. And you need to respect the space of other people and act in a way that we would call menschlich, civilized, dignified. And there's not necessarily a rule book for this. There's a law, not a law, there's an idea also. It's kind of under the rubric of the Ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your fellow Jew as you would love yourself, or as you would like them to do for you. It's kind of also a little bit nebulous, but there are things in there that indicate there's no law necessarily, but it kind of shapes what kind of person you are. Um, you're selling your house, and somebody who comes to look for the house is somebody that you know is really going to cause problems for this neighborhood. Um, you have the right to say, I don't think that this is a good fit, thinking about the others. So your neighbors don't come afterwards and say, what did you do to us? You sold us out just because you wanted to get a bit of a higher price. So says the Netziv, these are things that are kind of between the lines. Um, Something I heard about that many of you may know, that it's really a very odious thing that people tell me that when they try to book, sometimes to book appointments at government offices, no dates are available. I was told that there are some people who buy up the dates, or who tie up, maybe not buy up, they tie up the dates so that the dates aren't available, whether it's to get a new passport or a driver's license or whatever it may be. And then they sell those dates to people by saying, okay, you'll go on and we'll cancel our date the moment that you apply for it. But you have to pay us for that. I mean, this is something that there may not necessarily be a law against it. I guess there should be, but this is what it means, Vasita Tova Yashar. Do that which is good, and right. How do you know? Well, Be'enei Hashem, in the eyes of God, how do you know how God feels about anything? And that goes back to what we said. Listen carefully to the mitzvot, and you will sense, you'll get a sense of appreciation for these little bits of holiness and of attitude and consideration for others that are very godly, but they're not necessarily written down. Um, and another way of looking at it is maybe to further gain a way of knowing what is and isn't, wouldn't make you holier, is to think about how does Hashem act, and to imitate. Imitatio Deo, in Latin, imitate God. God is patient, so you be patient. Somebody gets on your nerves, somebody, doesn't do what you've asked for immediately. Understand that God is very patient. God does not act negatively against somebody immediately. There's a sense of waiting, and maybe the person will improve. God is forgiving, so you be forgiving. Um, there are certain laws about this, of course, but some of them are kind of between the lines. God is merciful, you be merciful. See somebody or something struggling, and you help it. It could be also, even an animal. Um, Act with chesed, act with mercy, because that is imitating Hashem, who also acts with mercy and looks upon those who are less fortunate. Um, Go what we call in Hebrew lifnim mishurat hadin. Go the extra mile. Go over and above what you are required to do. We learned that was one of the things that caused the Beit HaMikdash to be destroyed, that people would not go lifnim mishurat hadin. They were very, very strict, and they would not give anybody a second chance or a little bit of slack. And of course, Hashem does that for us all the time. and is very patient and is willing to maybe sometimes give us the benefit of the doubt, even though God knows our minds. These are ways of imitating Hashem. Um, respect, respect for the elderly. We have, of course, a law about that. Lifnei sebat takum, you shall rise before the elderly. But yet that can be done in many different ways. Um, we say that Hashem respects the elderly, and that's just another indication we should do the same. Hashem has mercy, and we should have mercy. You see and know people who are hurting financially. Maybe you try to give them uh, some good advice, what they may be able to do to help them out of their financial difficulties. Maybe you help them. I mean, we have tzedakah, but tzedakah is pretty much undefined. We're not told really this is how much you should give. There are laws of tzedakah, but this is something you have to judge for yourself and to understand who needs tzedakah and who doesn't. Unfortunately, many of the people collecting tzedakah are much less in need than the people who aren't collecting. But it's hard to find them. But if you can seek those people out and just know, because people can be very, very, proud, and they're very embarrassed. They don't want to tell about their financial condition. But we all know people like that. Um, and those often are the people who need help the most and don't want to ask for it. They're very humble, they're very proud. And, we try to seek them out, be proactive about them. We know, of course, that there are special laws for widows and orphans. And I think we do try to help them even more and to have more rahmanut, more rahmanus on them because of their particular situation. But sometimes they will say, I don't need anything. I don't want anything. You have to find a way, perhaps, to, if you really believe that that's not true, that they do need things, maybe you do it anonymously. Maybe something that a gift they can't return. Um, no slip inside that allows you to return it. You must keep it whether you like it or not. That's another way of just doing something to help them even when they're too proud to accept or request the help. We're told to observe and to hear. Uh, by listening to people, you often can pick up on exactly what they need, even if they don't enunciate it. You can tell if something is really bothering them and hurting them, and be a listening ear, be an attentive person, give them some of your time, which may be all they're really looking for. And that is one of these ideas of Hatova Hayashar. There's another aspect too, and that is sometimes you have to decide, what would Hashem want me to do in this situation where there is a clash of values? I think I've told you this story before, but it's such a powerful story that had such an effect on me and continues to since I heard it many, many, many years ago from Rabbi Raphael Grossman of blessed memory. His son actually is a member at Ohel Ari. And he was speaking. This is when I was a youth director, and he was speaking to the youth, to the teenagers, and he told quite an amazing story. I think I've said it before, but I want to repeat it anyway. He, living in New York, he was just recently became a rabbi. There was no Eruv there. You could not carry on Shabbat in public in New York City. And he was walking home with another couple of friends when he came upon the scene of a very drastic accident. And a black woman, had been hit by a car and was bleeding profusely. And really, without thinking, he pulled off his talit, he ran over, and he placed the talit on this woman um, to cover her up, maybe to keep her warm, or because it just was unsightly with the blood. And the woman passed away. And after he did this, he was overcome by a sense of guilt. What did I do? I carried my talit on Shabbat, and that is not permissible. And he had, this feeling of how will God forgive me? What did I do? And he ran to the home of his rabbi, who was also a very famous Rav who came to Yerushalayim named Rav Gustman, Gustman. And he came to him and he said, Rebbe, I did something today and I don't know. I'm plagued by whether I did something right or wrong. And he told Rav Gustman the story of what had happened. And Rabbi Gustman turned to him and he said to him, Raphael, you will in your life, I'm sure, do many great things, have a great career, and bring much pride to that talit that you wear, one of the mitzvot that completely envelops you. And certainly you will bring it honor. But I can tell you right now, you will never bring more kavod and honor to that talit as you did the moment you placed it on that dying woman. And so the point I think he was making so dramatically was sometimes you do have to think for yourself. And sometimes you ask yourself, what would Hashem want me to do in this situation? Yes, it's a clash of values. And yes, not all of these situations can be solved so easily. But there are times when you feel, today I did what I think God would have wanted me to do. That is the way to bring bracha. In all of our lives, we sometimes are faced with these crises and these very, very tough choices that we have to make. But at the end of the day, what can and should go through our head and our heart is thinking, what does Hashem really want me to do in this situation? Because he gave me a brain, he gave me an intellect that I should be able, and emotions and the ability to care, I should be able to decide. And then you will be able to live with yourself. You might say, it's unfortunate I had to do this, but I feel I had to do it. And this is what God would have wanted me to do. It's a powerful lesson. And by listening intently, as we said in the beginning, to the Torah and its stories and its mitzvot, hopefully you will come out of it with a sense of what is just, what is righteous, what is appropriate, what is proper, and most of all, what is it that Hashem would want me to do in this situation? We have two soldiers today, unfortunately, who were killed in Lebanon. So we mourn their loss of these Chayalim Kadoshim and keep all of our soldiers in mind as we say the prayer for Chayalei Tzahal. Vishaber Chavatenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Yivarech et Chayalei Tzva Haganah Yisrael. העומדים על משמרתנו בערי אלוהינו עד מגבול לבנון עד מדבר מצרים מן הים הגדול עד לבוא הערבה ביבשה באוויר ובים. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם ויתרים בחטא ישועה בעטרת ניצחון. ויקוים בהם הכתוב כי אדוני אלוהיכם הולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיעכם ונאמר amen. Thank you to Yossi, our host, and Bezrat Hashem, we shall meet again, same time, same place, next Thursday. Continue having a wonderful summer and a Shabbat Shalom, and we should only have the Sorot, Tovot, Yeshuot, Benechamot.